Hello weirdos and welcome back to my channel. My name is EmmaAbe. Today's video, I thought I would do something like a little bit fun to kind of reflect on 2020. I wanted to look a little bit at my reading statistics. I wanted to do something more than just looking at Goodreads, because obviously like Goodreads has its like year in review book things. That's all great. But I wanted to not only look at that, but also look at some of the stuff that the story graph offers in terms of statistics. And then I also kind of wanted to show you a little bit of my personal statistics that I keep in track at the end. Let's first look at Goodreads. Here's 2020, year in books. I read a total of 54,000 pages, over 54,000. That's a lot, and 152 books. I wanted to make it a nice even 150, but that obviously didn't work out, but that's okay. So I met my goal. My goal was 100 books. The shortest book was The Pearl by John Steinbeck. That was only 96 pages. That's not a big surprise to me. I read that over the summer. I thought it was pretty good. The longest book, over 1,000 pages, is Grant by Ron Chernow. Yeah, that was huge. It actually helped me do a lot of my homework. I would like listen to a chapter, and like each chapter would be like 40 minutes long, not sped up. And I would like take notes and like go through the stuff I had to go through for the class. So the average book length I read is 355 pages. I just want to let you guys know I don't track a lot of things. You'll see my personal statistics and the shit that I give a crap about in terms of my reading stuff. So the most popular book I read is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. That doesn't really surprise me at all. There's over 2 million, close to 3 million people who've shelved it. And the least popular, I believe, is Chinese Society and Culture. It's this book right here by Yao Baoreng and Wei Zhu. This doesn't surprise me either, because this book is a book that you could only really get in China, and it's meant for tourists, foreigners. So it doesn't surprise me that there's not a lot of people who've seen this book. It's a really interesting view into Chinese society. My average rating was a 3.9. I don't remember what last year's average rating was. Let's go look at that. Hey, it was also a 3.9. Wow, look at that. I'm consistent in some things. I didn't do a video like this for last year because I didn't have a whole year's worth of data, but now that I have a whole year's worth of data, like, I can totally do it. So the highest rated book I read on Goodreads is The Only Plane in the Sky by Garrett M. Graff, and that had a 4.73 average. And then it just kind of lists all the books you read, which, you know, there's a lot. I read a lot. So these statistics I think are like fun and cute, but I don't really feel like much about them. I think it's cool to like know what's the most popular, what's the least popular, what's the longest, what's the shortest, and like averages. But it feels kind of like lackluster personally. I do enjoy like looking at these statistics like throughout the years, but it just feels like Goodreads could like track more. So let's go see some of the other statistics that Goodreads provides. Also, this is a smoothie that my brother made. It's delicious. He's so good at making smoothies. Here you can kind of see all of the years together. It's not really fair to compare in terms of full years because it's only half a year. This is, you know, a couple weeks in. But I think it's cool that you can see the details and you can see which books I rated what. Again, the shortest and the longest book. Let's look at pages. You can kind of see a little bit of pages over time. Publication year. I think this takes into account all of the books that you've read. It doesn't separate it about when you read them, which I think would be nice to be able to say like, oh, can I see the publication years from only the books that I read in 2020 or 2019. Most of the stuff is very, very recent. You can see the one that I've read the furthest back was Persuasion. That was written in 1818. It's not the oldest book I've read. I've read the Bible, for God's sakes. Yeah, cover to cover. I was a weird child. I still am a weird person. This is books over time. As you can see, this spike here, this is going to be July, because I read so many books in July. Yup, I like read 23. It was ridiculous. Again, this doesn't offer like much more. I think it's cool to see like on a whole chart to be able to compare pages and like books over time and like publication year. But ultimately, like, I want more statistics. So let's move on to the story graph. So here's a story graph. If you don't know, the story graph is kind of like this grassroots movement of people who want to create an app like Goodreads, but don't want it to be affiliated with companies like Amazon, because if you don't know, Goodreads is owned by Amazon. And I think it's great. I don't use it as much as I use Goodreads, but I do try and keep it like relatively up to date. As you can see, I haven't even put my profile picture in this yet, which I will do eventually. What's really cool is you can import your Goodreads data into this, and I did, and it, for the most part, caught everything. There was about a discrepancy of about 20 books in my 2020 reading list that I had to go and correct, and most of those, they did just for some reason didn't registered as like read during a certain time. That wasn't too difficult at like all to fix, and I think like overall there was just like a handful of books that weren't in. Like, it caught this one, for goodness sakes. Okay, that's impressive. Let's look at the stats that Storygraph has to offer. By the way, I'll link the Storygraph in the description below. If they have like a whole reading preferences thing that you can fill out and they can recommend you books. I have not filled this out yet, and I think they have more like reading challenges and stuff, but we're just looking at the statistics right now. As you can see, you can show stats from different months. So we're just going to look at 2020. And I think it's really cool that you can show stats like per month as well. I love that because sometimes you just want to like analyze like a single month of data. So again, 152 books. This is showing a discrepancy in the pages, but I think that's due to like different editions having different lengths of books. For me, like the book number is more important than the pages number because I don't really care about how many pages I've read. What's really cool is this genre breakdown / mood breakdown. I think it'd be really cool to have like a genre breakdown in Goodreads, which we'll get to it in a second. I've seen this stuff before, just so you know. So I think it's really cool. So my highest category is reflective, and you can click on it and it'll tell you which books fall into the reflective category. To me, it doesn't really mean anything because there's all sorts of different books from all genres that fit into this reflective category. It's just out of curiosity, what is my least? Oh, look at that. Hopeful. There's 3. Relaxing. Pumpkinheads. Okay, interesting. You can like tag the moods too. So maybe that's where like that's coming from. So you can have a book fall into multiple moods. Oh, which ones were sad? I'm just curious, poking around. The 5. Yeah, that was fucking sad. Yeah, I would agree with like all of these. Yeah, some of those books made me freaking cry. Although this one I would almost categorize as like hopeful. All right, let's move on. This one I think is interesting because you can do pace, which again to me like doesn't really mean anything because most of what I read is nonfiction. There's like fast paced, slow paced, medium paced. I don't really know what determines those numbers. So we have page numbers. So I've made a concentrated effort in 2020 to read more chunksters, especially in the latter half of the year, in the past like 4 months. And the most are just medium, because that's where most nonfiction fall in there. We have the breakdown between fiction and nonfiction. Look at that, 83 nonfiction and 68 I can read fiction. I think a lot of this is like books that I had to read for like Goodreads and stuff. I did wind up reading a lot of fiction, I think proportionally this year. All good stuff, all good stuff. I've read a lot of good stuff. So then we get to see a genre breakdown, which I love. I like seeing what genres I read. I really like that. The most genres I've read is history. That makes sense. Like, I like history. Next one is fantasy. Fantasy is a second. Interesting. Oh, yeah. It's a lot of the book that I read for the Percy Jackson stuff that bumps those numbers up a lot. Then you have biography. What I really like is that with each of these things, you can like click, like let's click on, let's click on travel. And you can see all of books that fall under that status, which I'm just like, Emma, she doesn't really have to deal with travel. It's just, gut punch. It's interesting. So let's look at the least read. Play? What play did I read? Okay, yeah, that makes sense. It's not really a play, but we'll go with it. It is about a play. So the lowest one is like gender, dystopian. Which one was dystopian? Yeah, Amancio. Makes sense. Crime. What was crime? Say nothing. Okay. Then we can see the number of books and pages. I think this is cool. I like this graph. One thing that I will say about the story graph statistics is all of the visuals look really, really clean and really, really nice in a way that you don't see in Goodreads. Like, I love seeing these charts and graphs and pie charts, and you'll see that later with my personal statistics. I just think these are great. These charts are great. And then you have the star rating. That makes sense. I reviewed most of them as 4. So one thing that I think is cool with this that you can't do with Goodreads is you can compare 2 different time periods. So let's do that. Yeah, let's compare all time. Why not? Compare 2020. So you can see the total books. This is 2020 and this is all time. So this is 200 books versus like 150 books. So you see informative is the greatest and then second is reflective, and that switched around in 2020, but like not by much. They're still like roughly like the same values. And again, same breakdown in terms of pace, page numbers, again, made a more concentrated effort to read fast-paced ones. And again, like you can see overall, all the books I've read while being an active user on Goodreads, which has been the amount of time that my channel has been alive, I tend definitely more towards the nonfiction side. Genre. Top is history. Then biography. This history, then it's fantasy. It's really interesting. Memoir, whereas fantasy was a little bit lower. Interesting. So you're seeing like the same genres that are popping up. They're just appearing in slightly different orders. Star ratings look just about the same. One thing I think that would be interesting for either Goodreads or the Storygraph, but I kind of want the Storygraph to do it because I think the Storygraph's cool, is I would love to see kind of like ratings based on like how well you liked something, if that makes any sense. So if I wanted to like reasonably look at these statistics in terms of like books that I like, that, and I think it'd be really like fairly easy to implement because all you would have to do is catch all of the data with a certain star rating and above, and like I could set that star rating to be like, hey, only include data from books that I rated like 4 or higher, and I would like to see that breakdown of data. Here's my book catalog. So I have this first, so I have like a giant ass catalog of all of the books that I own. It's mostly up to date. There's about like 15 books that I haven't put in yet. But for the most part, this is a relatively representative. So what I do is I have the title, all of the authors, all of the category. It's not necessarily a genre. It does go along with genre, but I like to break down the books I own into specific categories. So if you see like the category of China, so it's all the books that I have to deal about China. And then I have Civil War category, biography, anthropology, memoir. And then I like separate fiction to be classics and fiction. I do a lot more nuanced breakdown of nonfiction because I care a lot more. Then I keep track of like, have I read this book? Is there an audiobook? Yes or no? The language that it's in, the number of pages it is, where it is, because I move around a lot and I need to keep track of where my books are. I don't update this as much as I should. And then I keep track of which of the library services that I have which books. So if it doesn't have an audiobook, it obviously gets a no because I'm only keeping track of audiobooks because I want to know how easy it is for me to read a certain book. And Audible has most of everything. And then Chicago means the library that I'm at in Chicago doesn't have as much because it's a smaller library, and Cincinnati has a lot. Yeah, and I like it color-coded because it just makes it easier to see. So there's a total of 424 books. It's important to keep in mind that these books are like my like library. So they're books that would like travel with me like when I find a permanent home. And then I have this other sheet that's children. It keeps track of like the same things as the other sheet does. It just is exclusively devoted to children's books. And this is not super updated at all. It just basically took all of the books that were on this sheet, this first sheet, and I moved them into this sheet, and I haven't gone through the actual bookshelf and added all of the books. The same kinds of things are tracked. Now onto like the actual stats that I keep track of. As you can see, I like pie charts. So I keep track of like the rough, like out of the books I own, what percentage of books I've read. So I've read about 33% of my entire book collection, and this is only keeping in mind the books in my main like library. It's only books from like this sheet 1. It's counting none of my children's books. Hover over and see that's 140 books. So I have almost 300 books that I haven't read. Leave me alone. And so then I keep track of what percentage of the books have audiobooks or not, because that's an important statistic for me. Again, neither of those like audiobook stuff is tracked in Goodreads or Storygraph. This is stuff I track for myself because having access to audiobooks is important to me. As you can see, I need to change this a little bit, or at least need to go back into the data and get rid of this lowercase yes. But over half of my books have audiobooks. And then I took it a step further and I was like, okay, let's really expose myself and let's see what percentage of books that I've read that I own have no audiobooks. So it's an even more dismal number. I've only read 31 of the books on my bookshelves that don't have audiobooks. And I'm obviously working on making that statistic better. Obviously, as you can see, these are read books that have audiobooks. I've read, not most, because it's still less than 50%, but I've read significantly more of my collection that have audiobooks than haven't. I felt really exposed when I first saw these numbers. That's okay. That means I need to make a concentrated effort on improving these numbers. And then I also like to keep like a category to see like what is like the breakdown of the stuff that I own in terms of categories or genres, because I'm curious. So obviously like fiction is the biggest, but again, fiction isn't subdivided at all other than fiction and classic. So those I like are the two biggest. If you separate between fiction and nonfiction, which I don't, you get the majority, all of this is nonfiction. Some of the big categories like these, like it's just my textbook. I've got like 22 textbooks. Yeah, I keep track of my textbooks and which ones I've read and which ones I haven't. There's just memoirs, anthropology, yeah. So stuff that has like one, it's like I have one teaching book. I have one I don't know how to categorize. A couple other where there's like self-help, there's one. Looks like I need to change that. Instead of it being textbooks, I need to change it to text a book. When I did this, I found out that there was like a lot of just repeated categories because the text in these sheets aren't all exactly the same. So I, for instance, instead of saying like classic, it could say classics, or it could be a lowercase classic. So I had to go through and I caught most of them, but obviously I still have some that I need to validate. The thing I really keep track of is roughly like the number of pages a book has and like the amount I have. So that's not right. I don't label these because I'm a horrible data person. So along the bottom is the number of pages in the book, and it's a count of how many like books fall into that range of pages. 225 pages to 300 pages. I have 92 books that fall into that category. I've got 17 that fall into less than 75. And then I have one that's between 1500 pages. Those are my statistics. I hope you liked it. I hope you guys liked this video. This was longer than I thought it would be. But yeah, have a nice day. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you thought about this video. All of that fun stuff. Okay, bye.